guys. Sorry about the delay. As usual, I was waiting for the ad to go away. Welcome in. For those who might be new to the channel or have not been here in a while, my name is Meshla. I'm primarily an audiobook streamer. What that means in my particular case is that I write and read Star Wars fanfiction, and I have been doing so for, oh my goodness, 25 years? Yeah, it's a while. So, tonight we are continuing our journey into A Warrior's Heart, which is the third story? Yes, third story in the Daughter's Quest arc. I say third with a question mark because there's some stories that have been added that are not quite finished. So that's why there was a question mark on that one. I am going to just preface tonight by telling you that tonight's chapters are a little heavy, and if that's not your thing, I totally understand. They're not super graphic, it just deals with some content that might be rough for some people to hear. So I'm just putting that out there. Thanks, Eyeliner, I appreciate you. That's right, Lily. If you're curious about Frosty Tools, go check it out. It's an awesome little bot that I have been using in my chat for the last, probably 6 to 9 months. It feels like that. It's pretty awesome. It's AI, obviously. It crafts shoutouts. It responds to you if you tag me in chat. Cool stuff like that. So go make that dinner, Eyeliner. We'll be here. Yeah, I'm not sure what is up with my alerts on the starting screen. I may have to get with to Sniper about that, or one of my other mods, because they should be working on the start screen and they're not. So, not sure what's up with that. But anyway, as I said, we're going to be reading tonight, and I just wanted to let you guys know that it may be a little rough. So, hang in there, get cozy, and hopefully it's not too rough. Oh, you're trapped by cats? How perfect, because we have all the cats here. You can have a surrogate cat. Right. Let me get some water before we get started. Just a heads up, I may lose my voice or nearly lose my voice because, like I said, this is gonna be a little bit heavier than so if I start to lose my voice, just bear with me, and we'll keep going as we can. Yeah. Thank you, Deswelix, for the sub. Like I said, not sure why it didn't go off. There's the cool little alert when people sub to my channel, so I was a little bit sad that it didn't trigger. Alright. So we will be reading chapters 11 to 14. We can get that far. Hopefully we can. I'm gonna actually go a little bit longer tonight if needed. Usually for the reading streams I go till 9, but I may actually go till 10, or hopefully it doesn't go all the way till 10. We'll find out. Usually I can get through 3 or 4 chapters, but they are a little bit longer now, as I have been working on some revision and expansion on the chapters, and also all of her stories in general. Oh. So sorry about that. Oh my goodness. Not a good way to be starting my evening. Sorry. Okay. Now if I can have a little less of that, we'll be good. So as I was saying before that so rudely interrupted me, we will be reading chapters 11 to 14 this evening. So bear with me, and I'm hoping we can get all the way through, because as rough as these might be, they are very important to her story at this point in time, so I felt that they were necessary. There's nothing, like, you know, super violent about it. It's just, it's some rough content. So I just wanted to kind of forewarn people if you're sensitive to that kind of thing. So just bear with me a little bit. I'm gonna get some more water here. Oh my goodness, my voice. I'm gonna be right back, actually, so give me just a minute while I do that. Alright. So sorry about that. Anyway. We're gonna start with chapter 11, and we'll see how far we get this evening. Bear with. Snuggle up. Not as cozy as more normal chapters. I apologize for that. So, hang in there. We'll get through this. Chapter 11. The stars were just beginning to fade in the east when Ethan stepped onto the veranda. The air still held the chill of night, damp with mountain fog, and he didn't bother with a cloak or a wrap. His arms folded across his chest. He stood near the edge of the stone rail, his gaze fixed on the forest stretching far below. He heard the quiet footsteps behind him before the door even finished swinging shut. "I didn't expect you up this early," Ethan muttered, not even turning. Jared stepped up beside him, hair still damp, a mug of calf in his hand. "I didn't sleep much." Ethan glanced at him sideways. "She's still out?" Jared nodded. "Dead to the world. She needs the rest. She always pushes too hard." Jared didn't argue. He didn't have to. The door opened once more, softer this time. Aran emerged, his boots barely making a sound on the stone. He was dressed plainly, no armor, but still moved like a man who expected trouble. "I figured we'd speak before morning came," he said. Ethan eyed him for a long second, then gave a slight nod and jerked his chin towards the edge. "Good. I didn't want anything left unclear." Aran didn't bristle. He walked up beside them and crossed his arms, mirroring Ethan's stance. "I'm not going to pretend I'm the best one to do this, but she asked, and I've been through worse than most. If she's serious about learning to resist, I'll teach her what I know. Carefully." Jared exhaled slowly. "It's the carefully I'm worried about." "I'm not Laurel," Aran said quietly. "No," Ethan agreed. "You're not. That's the only reason I'm allowing this." There was silence for a time, the faint rustle of wind in the trees below, a few early birds calling out to the new day. Then, finally, Ethan spoke again, softer this time. "She's still healing, not just from Bestine, from everything. You push too hard." "I won't," Aran said firmly. "But she doesn't need gentle. Not for this. She needs to know what she's made of and what won't break her." Jared studied him for a long moment and then said, "She trusts you. That's the only reason I'm not stepping in." Aran's green eyes flicked towards him. You think I don't know what that means? Or how easy it is to break someone if you stop seeing them as real? Jared met his gaze. I think you know exactly how easy it is. Ethan raised a hand. Enough! We're not here to posture. We're here to make sure she doesn't end up broken again. Not like Bastine. You told me about that, Aran said. Not the whole thing, but enough. They were silent again, the three of them staring out into the misty trees, brothers in arms, though none of them would say it. I'll run point, Ethan said finally. If she starts to falter, it ends. Clear? Aran nodded. Clear. Jared finished his calf in a slow swallow. If she asks to stop, she won't, Ethan muttered. Not unless we make her. She's too much like you, Aran said wryly. Ethan cracked a faint, rueful grin. Don't remind me. The first traces of gold split the sky as dawn began to warm the ridgelines. Jared turned back to head inside. We start at sunup? Ethan nodded. At the ridge clearing, she chose the place herself. Aran gave one last look towards the horizon. Then I'll be ready. They parted without ceremony, just three men, bound by worry, duty, and the girl who'd asked them for something none of them truly wanted her to need. The sun rose behind them and the new day began. The ridge clearing, just before dawn. Marin stood at the edge of the ridge, the place she had chosen herself. It wasn't far from the estate, close enough that Ethan and the others could reach it quickly, but far enough that it felt like its own world. The mist clung low to the ground, curling around her boots as she stepped through the dew-damp grass. Pale stone markers from an old outpost ringed the outer edge of the clearing, relics of some long-forgotten skirmish. They reminded her of bones. Quiet sentinels, even. She adjusted the drape of her Katani cloak and inhaled deeply, letting the cold mountain air steady her. Her arms still ached faintly from the trial. The burns had faded, but memory still lingered in sinew and breath. Her tunic and skirt were simple this morning. No armor, no weapons, just fabric, wrapped close. In the weeks since her trial, she had returned to Tanagas hoping for stillness. Instead, she'd found this next step waiting for her. You wouldn't have Darboy running it, Aran had said. That mattered more than he knew. She crouched down and ran her fingers over the moss-laced stone beneath her, her fingers brushing across a small white flower growing up through the cracks. It was the kind her father had once tucked behind her ear when she was small. For a moment she imagined Jarius' voice behind her, quiet approval, not unlike what she'd heard in the vision after her trial. You've chosen your path, Erica. Walk it with both eyes open. I will, she whispered, her voice barely carrying over the wind. But it's hard. She rose slowly, wiping her palms against her skirt and let her gaze drift eastward. The horizon was beginning to catch fire, golden light bleeding over the trees, casting long shadows behind her. She heard movement, quick steps, deliberate, but not invasive. Jared. I thought you were going to sleep in, she said without turning. I thought you'd be pacing. His voice was warm, careful, a familiar thread. I was. He stepped up beside her and stood in silence for a long while. You're sure you want to do this? Mara didn't answer right away. She watched the light spread, casting warm amber against the pale trunks of the trees. No, she said finally, but I need it. Or anything else. He looked at her then, searching her face. You know, Ethan and Callista aren't thrilled about this. She nodded once. I don't need them to be. I just need them to let me try. Jared exhaled. Aran's taking this seriously. You scared him when you asked for it. I scared myself, she admitted. But I remember what Laurel did, what they all did. I can't let it happen again. You'll never be alone like that again, Jared promised quietly. She turned towards him, and for a moment her expression softened. I know. He reached out and gently brushed her sleeve. When you're ready, we'll go. Ethan's already there. Let them wait for a few more minutes, she said. And so they stood in silence, watching the morning arrive, the last breath of stillness before the trials to come. desert estate, early morning. The floor was cool beneath her bare feet as she stepped quietly through the corridor. The early morning light slipped through the high, slotted windows, painting the stone in muted gold and gray. She walked without haste, letting the moment linger. Jared had peeled off towards the hearth room, likely to update Ethan or grab something warm to drink. She didn't ask. They all knew what came next. Her room was still as she entered, just as she'd left it before dawn. Folded garments waited on the low bench near the hearth, placed there last night after she'd told Ethan what she planned. Her training tunic was black, simple and fitted, with the slightest katana weave at the hem and wrists. She dressed in silence, methodically. First the tunic, then the wrap skirt over fitted leggings, stitched with a plain corded belt. No saber, no van braces. This wasn't a duel. She paused as she fastened the last tie at her wrist. The mirror beside her reflected a young woman not unlike the one who had knelt before the council, but not the same. There was something sharper in her eyes now, grounded, not in defiance, not as armor, but in truth. She still wasn't sure what that truth was, but she was ready to face it. Walk it with both eyes open. Her father's words echoed once more. The ridged clearing. The forest opened up before her as she stepped into the clearing again. This time, she wasn't alone. Ethan stood near the tree line, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. His armor was half donned, Beskar plates worn more like habit than necessity. Callista lingered in the shadows near the outer path, her presence subtle but constant. And Aren stood at the center. He wore his mottled cloak, though he'd shed the upper half to his waist, revealing a training rig beneath, plain and weathered, and fitted with old leather reinforcement. His boots were planted, shoulder-width apart, no weapons. He turned at her approach. Merrin drew a breath and walked forward without pausing. Ethan stepped once into her path, not to stop her, to meet her gaze squarely. You don't have to prove anything, Merrin. I'm not trying to, she said gently. His jaw flexed once, but he nodded. Then go. She gave him a faint nod in return, grateful but firm, and moved past him to face Aren. Aren didn't speak at first. His gaze flicked over her stance, the tension in her shoulders, the set of her mouth. He exhaled slowly. This is your choice, he said quietly, and I'll make sure it stays yours. The second it's too much, I'll say, Merrin answered, her voice level. He dipped his chin in acknowledgement. Callista, unseen by them both, shifted slightly. Her arms were folded in front of her, her fingers flexing against her sleeves. She hated this. Everything in her did, but she remained still because Merrin had asked and because Ethan had let her. Aren straightened. Then let's begin. Hi, Mega. I think they are doing, no. I don't know what they're doing Dustin again. I'm not playing SWTOR tonight. Haven't heard. The air was cool in the clearing, the scent of pine clinging to the wind. A faint mist hung out low over the grass, but the sun had begun its slow rise behind the trees, painting the sky with early gold. Merrin took her place at the center of the clearing. Quiet thud of her boots on the soft earth was the only sound. She stood with her hands at her sides, her expression calm, but not detached. Her dark tunic stirred slightly in the breeze, the woven hem catching what little light filtered through the canopy above. Aren moved in slowly, unarmed, his posture relaxed. His voice was low. This isn't combat, he said. Not in the usual way. What I say, what I do, it won't be real. But your mind may not know the difference. You remember what I told you? Merrin nodded once. You said it wouldn't be easy, that it would push at old scars, try to open them. He studied her, his brow furrowed. If it starts to feel like more than you can take, say the word. I won't push past it. I trust you, she replied. That's why I asked. That made him pause, just for a second, then he stepped back and exhaled. All right, then I'm not Aren anymore. His eyes shifted, not in color, but in focus. His stance hardened subtly, shoulders forward, chin tucked, predatory. Not like the man she'd spoken with by the lake, not like the figure who'd flinched when she'd spoken of her braid. Sit, he ordered coldly. She hesitated. I said sit! Her body responded before she meant it to. She dropped into a crouch, one knee down. She kept her eyes on him. That's better, he muttered. You follow orders now, do you? It depends on who's giving them. He moved fast, suddenly, violently, his boot hitting the earth beside her knee with a sharp thud that shook the ground. You want to play brave? He snarled. You think the next time they take you, they won't know how to break you? Her breath caught. The tone. It was too close. Too much like Laurel's, the voice that haunted corridors and her dreams. She stared at him, her jaw clenched. Say your name. Marin Durza. He circled behind her. Say it again. Marin Durza. Again. Marin Durza. Louder. Marin Durza. Silent. Behind her, Ren didn't move. Then softly, coldly, he spoke. Wrong answer. A hand gripped her shoulder, not hard enough to bruise, but enough to remind her. You think names matter? That clinging to it makes you strong? No, she said through gritted teeth, but it makes me me. That's what they'll strip from you, he said. That's what they'll use. He leaned closer. You'll forget your name long before they stop, unless you anchor it. I'm trying, she whispered. You're not trying. You're surviving. There's a difference. Silence fell between them again, until she drew a ragged breath. Then she said it again, not shouted, not defiant, just steady. Marin Durza. And again, Marin Durza. It was quieter this time, but the words didn't falter. Across the clearing, Ethan stood with his arms folded, his lips tight. Callista watched from the shadows, one hand pressed to her chest, feeling the pain she couldn't stop. But she didn't intervene. Not yet. Not while Marin held her ground, back in the center and moved in front of her again. He studied her carefully. She hadn't moved. I'm going to do worse, he said, softly. You know that, right? She met his gaze. Yes, I know. Why? Because I asked you to. His mask faltered for just a second, but only a second. Then he stepped back, and the next phase began. They stood just above the tree line on the worn wooden veranda attached to one of the old marine lookouts, now repurposed into a silent watch post overlooking the Durza estate's northern perimeter. Ethan leaned forward against the railing, arms braced wide, his gaze fixed on the two figures far below. Marin and Aren moved slowly, deliberately, beneath the veil of rising mist. She asked, he muttered, more to himself than to Callista. I know. Her voice was quiet, almost gentle. She stood beside him, her cloak drawn around her shoulders, her hands tucked beneath her sleeves. She shouldn't have to, he said after a moment. Riff, she's earned peace. After Bastine, she's already carrying the ghost to places she hasn't even seen. Callista continued, her eyes never leaving the clearing. She's training for them anyway. I should have told her no. Callista shook her head once, firmly. No, you shouldn't have. Ethan looked away, exhaling roughly. You saw her, Cal. She was calm. Not hardened, not reckless, just ready. She was ready long before we ever were, Callista said. When you brought her to me after Bastine, I told you she would burn herself out before we could teach her to heal. Ethan didn't respond. She's not burning out now, continued. She's forging something. He closed his eyes briefly. She shouldn't have to know what it means to be broken to make that choice. She already knows. Callista's voice cracked slightly. We were just too late to stop it. A long silence stretched between them. Below, Aren barked a harsh command. Marin flinched, but stayed standing. She didn't break. Her voice rose again, calm and clear. Marin Durza. Do you remember the first time she called you Buir? Callista asked quietly. He swallowed. She'd fallen off the perimeter wall at the estate about a year after Jerry's was killed. Bit her lip. Thought I was going to yell at her. But you didn't. No, his voice softened. I wiped the blood off her chin and told her I was proud. Callista smiled faintly, and she said it, just once. Thank you, Blair. Like it had been waiting to come out. I'm gonna stop there, because we're about to be in an ad. I will be back in a minute and a half. Go take a chance to get yourself a drink of water, get a snack. I'm gonna take a chance to catch my breath, because I don't know about you, but my pulse rate's up. So, see you in a minute. Alright, you guys. I was able to get a drink of water. I'm gonna dive back in. Okay. Ethan straightened slowly. You think she'll make it through this? Calista turned slightly toward him. I think she's already doing it. He looked back towards the clearing. Aran stepped away again, letting her breathe. Marin's shoulders rose and fell, but she hadn't moved. She'll need us after, Ethan said. This won't leave her untouched. No, Callista agreed, but neither did everything that came before. They stood together, silent watchers on the ridge as the mist gave way to sunlight. And far below, Marin didn't yield. Jared crouched on a moss-covered ledge just beyond the perimeter of their old ridge clearing. His pale blue eyes tracking every step, every movement. He'd said nothing when Marin left the house that morning. Hadn't followed her immediately and hadn't needed to. He hadn't looked back, but he could still hear the edge in her voice from last night. The way she'd whispered, I need to do this, as though it were a confession. Not to him. Not really. To herself. So now, he watched. Aran circled her like a wolf, not attacking. Not quite, but prowling, testing, pushing. Jared's jaw tensed as he saw Marin falter, only slightly, when Aran's tone shifted. It wasn't the words themselves that bothered him, it was the cadence. calculated sharpness. He could feel it being used like a weapon. Merrin stood straight again. Jared closed his eyes briefly, reaching out with the force. Not to interfere, not even to shield her, just to sense her, to know she wasn't drowning under it. What he felt made his breath catch. Not rage, not fear, resolve. Steady, centered. Stars, Merrin. He knew what this was. It wasn't just training. This was her forging armor from every scar she couldn't show. And the fact she had scars, more than anyone had seen, even him, gnawed at him like an old wound that hadn't fully closed. I should be down there with her, he muttered, knowing he wouldn't move, knowing she hadn't even asked him to. From the branches above, a small bird took flight, startled by the sudden hiss of his breath. He leaned forward, forearms resting on his knees, hands clenched in front of him. Moran had stepped back again. Merrin wasn't shaking. She didn't need to lean on anyone. She's not a Padawan anymore, he thought, not without pain. She's not the girl who once ran off to Galan and tried to shoot me when I followed. She's stronger now, more measured, but still herself. Still the girl who looked at the stars like they might hold answers. Still the warrior who came back from Bastine broken, but not defeated. Still the woman he could follow anywhere, even if it meant watching her walk into fire. From the clearing below, Aran barked another command. Merrin didn't flinch. Jared's breath caught again, and this time he didn't force it down. He stood, not to reproach, just to be there, in case she looked for him, in case she wanted to know someone was watching. The sun had risen fully now, casting long slants of light between the pine branches, and Jared Algren, Jedi Knight, protector, and hers, stood as a quiet sentinel above the trees. The sun was higher now, but it didn't warm the clearing the way it had before. Not this time. Aran's stance had shifted. He wasn't circling now. He was still. His eyes were on her, silent. Merrin remained standing in the center of the clearing, her stance steady, her arms loose at her sides, her breathing measured. Nothing between her and the ghosts but her will. You're alone, Aran said finally, his voice low. Tanagas is gone. Your family is gone. You failed. Merrin said nothing. You failed Jarius, he continued, stepping closer. You led him to Galan. Her stomach clenched, but she didn't respond. She looked ahead, not at him, but past him, toward the trees, towards home. Still, she gave no reaction. How many more will die before you realize you're the common thread? Hold, Merrin. Just hold. He stepped forward again. She didn't move, didn't flinch. You think you've passed your trials and that makes you stronger? He asked, the edge sharp now. You think it means you've stopped breaking? His voice dropped an octave lower. Then why do you still wake up screaming? Her breath hitched. Only once. Silence stretched long between them. Jared, watching from above, had moved down from the ridge. Closer now. Just inside the edge of the trees, his hand pressed flat against a branch, holding himself back. He had to. This was Merrin's choice. She spoke, quiet, even. I'm not here to prove anything to you. I know, Aran said. You're here to prove it to yourself. He circled again. Say it. No. He stopped behind her, his voice cold. Say it. She turned slightly, keeping him in her peripheral vision. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I know I couldn't save them all. But you still blame yourself. Merrin's fingers twitched. You carry their names like armor, Aran continued, but you haven't laid them to rest. You haven't forgiven yourself. I'm not asking to be forgiven. You're not asking, he agreed, stepping in front of her once more, because part of you thinks you don't deserve it. The words cut sharper than any knife, because they weren't false. Not fully. Not in the places where the dark still. Her jaw clenched. That's not your call. I'm not making the call, Aran said, closing the distance between them. I'm just giving voice to the weight you refuse to name. The silence that followed was like thunder held in check. Her breathing quickened, her posture tight, but not unbroken. I watched him die, she said at last. I watched my father die. I felt it. I was 13 and I couldn't stop it. I still can't stop it. Her voice cracked, but her shoulders stayed straight, firm. I see fire when I close my eyes. I hear the screams. I remember Basine. I remember them all. And then slowly, deliberately, she let out a breath. But I'm still here. She met Iren's gaze squarely. So whatever you have left to say it. Sorry. Not used to doing male voices that long. He stared at her for a long moment, and then he stepped back. Good, he said quietly. That's enough for today. Marin's legs trembled as the adrenaline began to leave her. She felt the sweat cold on her neck, her pulse pounding in her ears, but she didn't fall. Jared was beside her in a moment, not touching, but there, solid. His presence and anchor. Iren, a few meters away, had turned toward the trees. You did well, Jared said gently, his voice low. Marin didn't answer right away. When she finally looked up at him, her expression was tired, but clear. I didn't break. No, he agreed. You didn't. She looked down at her hands, flexed them, and nodded once. Then tomorrow, we do it again. The hearth was quiet, the shadows long. Callista stood with her arms folded, leaning in the doorway of the study. She didn't speak right away, just watched the light shifting across the floor, golden streaks broken by the tall windows that faced west. Below, on the stone veranda, Ethan had pulled off his gloves and tossed them beside a half-finished mug of caf. His expression was tight. Not angry, just guarded. Jared was pacing, quiet, thoughtful. He'd kept his distance during the session, respecting Marin's space, but it hadn't been easy. Watching her stand against the ghost she rarely spoke of, let alone named, it stirred something fierce and helpless in him. He stopped only when Ethan finally exhaled and muttered. She held together longer than I thought she would. Have a good night, Daz. Thank you for the lurk. Callista moved to sit across from him on the stone bench. She's grown, stronger than she lets herself believe. Ethan didn't disagree. Jared sank down beside one of the carved pillars, his hands braced against his knees. He went hard on her. He was supposed to, Ethan said, flatly. I know. Jared ran a hand through his hair. It still felt wrong. Callista gave him a look, soft, but not unkind. You're not wrong to feel it. You care for her. Jared didn't answer that, but Ethan did. You're not the only one who hates this, he said, looking up at last. Every instinct I have says to shut this down. She's not a weapon. She's not meant to be put through this again. But she asked for it, Callista said gently. You saw her, Ethan. This wasn't about vengeance or proving herself. It's about preparing. So next time, she doesn't break. Ethan sat with that for a long while. Then he nodded, just once, slowly. She never really healed from Bastine, he said. Not fully. I carried her out of that hellhole. She could barely speak for a week, couldn't sleep, couldn't let anyone touch her without flinching. His voice dropped to a rasp. She still hasn't forgiven herself for surviving. Jared spoke this time. I know. Callista looked between them. You both love her in your own ways, and she'll need both of you. Ethan let out a sharp breath. Shouldn't have to do this. But she wants to, Jared said quietly. And if it helps her stand when it matters most, I'll be there, whatever she needs. Callista touched Ethan's hand then. She's not the girl from Bastine anymore. She's still healing, but she's choosing her path, and she's not walking it alone. Ethan looked down at their joined hands, then toward the stairs, where Marin's room sat beyond. Her footsteps had been quiet when she'd returned. She hadn't even removed her boots before collapsing onto her bunk, still wearing the tunic and training trousers she'd worn that morning. I just want her to find peace, he said, finally, even if it's in the fight. Jared stood. She'll find it, when she's ready. Callista nodded. And until then, we hold the line. Marin's room, late evening. The hearth had gone cold. The moonlight cast a silver glow through the slats of the high window, soft against the polished stone floor. Marin stirred. Not from a nightmare this time, just from quiet. The sort that slipped in when the adrenaline wore off and the ache in her muscles turned into something dull and lingering. She rolled onto her side and blinked towards the half-closed doorway. Someone was there. She didn't need the force to know who. Jared, she whispered. He stepped inside without a word, a shadow wrapped in soft layers of Jedi brown and Katani blue. His boots made no sound as he crossed to the edge of her bed and crouched, his elbows on his knees. Hey, he said, quietly. She smiled faintly and rubbed her eyes. How long have you been sitting out there? He gave a non-committal shrug. Long enough. I wanted to let you rest. I didn't think you'd sleep that deeply. I needed to, she murmured, sitting up against the headboard. I feel like I was scraped out and stitched back together again. Jared's expression tightened just slightly. He didn't go easy on you. I told him not to. He didn't need to, said, his voice low. I know what he is and what he came from. She looked down at her hands resting in her lap. Her sleeves were soft, simple fabric, worn at the edges. Not armor. Not even a tunic she would have trained in. Just something comfortable, homespun in the Katani style. You hate this, she said. I hate that it's necessary. Jared's tone was flat, but honest. That you want it. I need it, she corrected. If they ever take me again, I want to know that I can come back. He was quiet for a long moment. I know. Marin turned her head to look at him. You still think it's a mistake? No. He leaned forward, resting his hands on the edge of the bed. I just hate watching you go through something I can't fight. She exhaled, a sound that was almost a laugh. You fight enough for both of us. Jared offered a small smile. Only if you let me. She studied him for a moment, her gaze softening. The shadows painted his features in sharp relief, his jawline, the tired lines at the corners of his eyes. But there was something gentle there. There always had been. Glad you're here, she said quietly. He tilted his head. Even when I hover too much? Even then, she teased, before her voice turned serious again. You don't have to stay for all of this, and whatever's after. You could ask for a reassignment, go back to the core. The council wouldn't fault you. He leaned closer, reaching out, and took her hand, firm and steady. Not pleading, just there. I chose this. You. All of it. He met her eyes. I'm not leaving. Marin looked down at their joined hands, thumb brushing the old calluses across his knuckles. Quiet passed between them, warm and close, not heavy, not full of battle or memory, just now. I'm tired, she admitted. I know, but I feel stronger than I have in a long time. Jared stood slowly and drew the blanket up around her shoulders. Good, because you're not alone, Marin. Not ever again. She smiled softly, letting her eyes drift closed. Stay? He sat down beside her, back against the headboard, his arms loosely around her shoulders as she nestled into the curve of his side. As long as you need, he whispered. And together in the quiet they listened to the wind through the mountain trees. Wait just a second, guys, while I get some water. Doing all these male voices is making my voice hurt. I'm not used to doing all the male voices, so it's a bit of a challenge. Training circle, Dorza Estate, lakeside. The wind off the lake stirred the trees, but didn't reach the circle. It fell still here, watchful. Marin stood at its center, hands clasped loosely before her, her eyes open but unfocused. She let the rhythm of the water lull her, steady her. She could feel Jared's presence still behind her, distant but solid. She didn't reach for it. Not yet. Aran stood 10 paces from her, calm and composed. His stance was relaxed, but his eyes had taken on a different look. Gone was the quiet warmth she'd come to associate with him. In its place was a stillness that unnerved her. Ethan remained just outside the perimeter, arms folded. Silent sentinel. Aran took a slow breath. Isn't a test of strength. You're not here to prove anything. I know. He nodded once. You remember what we talked about. This will be like the early phases of a field interrogation. No torture, no pain, just erosion, doubt, the kind that gets inside your head. Marin's jaw tightened. Understood. He tilted his head. Then close your eyes. She hesitated, just for a breath, and then did as instructed. Don't reach for the force, not unless I tell you. He began slowly. The cadence of his voice was even, measured, almost soothing. You failed, Antanagas. Marin said nothing. You hesitated. That's why they took you. Still, silence. You let Laurel cut your braid. You let them strip it from you. You didn't fight hard enough. Her jaw twitched, but she kept her eyes closed. She was prepared for this. She was. You froze on Coruscant. You let your team walk into that trap. That was your fault. The words hit harder than they should have. She gritted her teeth, but the way Aran said it, he knew what haunted her. What she imagined every time she let herself wonder what could have gone wrong. Aran's voice dropped to a whisper. How many more are going to die because of your instincts, Aaron? Because you believe you can save everyone. Her hands curled into fists. Her breath hitched, but she didn't speak. Didn't lash out. Didn't fall. She centered herself, reached, not for the force, but for the lake, the earth, the wind. You want to be a watchman? He pressed. Circling now, still not touching her. Who's going to watch you when you break again? Enough, Ethan said from the edge, calm but cold. She's holding. Aran stopped. He studied her, shoulders trembling slightly, but her spine was straight. She hadn't broken. Not yet. He nodded once. All right. Marin's eyes opened, not wide, just enough to meet his. I thought you were going to try harder, she rasped. That earned a flicker of a grin. You'll get your wish tomorrow. Ethan stepped into the circle, his hand coming to rest briefly on her shoulder. It wasn't gentle, but it was grounding. You're done for today. Come back stronger. She gave the barest nod. Marin sat with a blanket wrapped loosely around her shoulders. She changed into softer tunics, her hair still damp from where she dunked her head in the basin inside. A shallow scrape marked one knuckle where her fist had curled too tightly. Jared sat nearby, his legs stretched out, a quiet mug of spiced tea in his hand. You didn't reach for me, he said, softly. I couldn't, she replied. Would you have? She looked out over the water, then slowly nodded. Eventually. Jared said nothing more. He just shifted a little closer, not touching, but enough that she knew he was there. Silence said what words couldn't. Tomorrow would be harder, but tonight she had endured. Well, we might get to chapter 14 tonight. We'll find out. Oh. That was the end of chapter 11. I don't know about you guys, but I need some water. Chapter 12. The training circle near the lake. The world had gone still. Marin sat cross-legged within the circle, her palms open and resting on her knees. Fingers slightly curled. Her breath moved evenly. For now. She could feel the coarse grit of the packed dirt beneath her, the smell of the lake water and pine, and hear Kestrel's cry high above. Ethan stood behind her. Aran faced her from the far side of the circle, his arms loose at his sides. his presence subdued. For now, he was not a friend, not ally, he was pressure. I'm not going to lay a hand on you, he said. His voice was steady, controlled, but I am going to speak. What you feel will come from you. Marin nodded once. Ethan didn't speak at all. But he moved just outside her awareness where an interrogator might stand, watching, judging, waiting for the first break. Aran stepped forward. His expression changed as if by sheer force of will. Softer lines vanished, warmth drained away. You came here for safety, he began. His tone was matter-of-fact. But you remember what they told you on Vestine, that no matter how far you run, no matter who shelters you, Gertzad will find you. Marin's jaw tensed. They already have found you. Once. Twice. You barely got away. How many more times do you think they'll let that happen? She closed her eyes, drawing in a breath. Slow, measured. You were lucky. That's all it was. Not strength. Not control. Laurel broke you. He said it flatly. And you know it. Her breath faltered. Just for a second. Ethan saw it. His eyes narrowed faintly. Duran would have broken you too, Duran added, had it not been for the others. Jared, Callista, Ethan. Still, she didn't answer. But you remember what it felt like, being left, forgotten. Felt it then, you feel it now. She tried to center her thoughts, tried to rise above the words as Stefan had taught, tried to draw on calm. But the words were true, and truth cut deeper than cruelty ever could. Aran's voice lowered. You told me you wanted to learn how to survive it. Then learn. Don't pretend you've already come through it whole. Her hands curled slightly on her knees. The air shifted, and Ethan stepped closer, not speaking, just moving into her space the way a Deathwatch commander might, the way a jailer would. She didn't flinch, but her breathing grew uneven. Aran saw it. Look at me, he said. Her eyes opened. They met his. What are you holding on to right now? He asked, softly. My name, she answered. My breath, and the fact that I walked out of that hell once. I'll do it again. He nodded, firmly. Good. Hold on to that. Then he turned away. The pressure broke. Not entirely, but enough to let her draw a breath. Ethan exhaled behind her. That was just the first step, he said. We'll go deeper tomorrow. Marin nodded, her voice hoarse. I know. She was pale, but steady. One second, guys. Kitchen hearth. Morning. The fire had burned low in the hearth, but Callista hadn't let it die out completely. She moved quietly between the kitchen and the sitting room beyond, her presence unhurried and calm. A soft clatter of cups, the scent of herbs steeping in warm water, and the crisp hint of mountain air drifting through a half-open window grounded the morning in a rare kind of peace. Marin entered barefoot, the skirt she wore with her teal wrap tunic brushing softly against the floor. She had tied her hair back loosely, still drying from the bath, and her posture was calm, if subdued. Callista looked up from the hearth. Good morning, Marika. Marin smiled faintly. You always say that like you know something I don't. That's because I usually do, Callista said, her tone light, but not flippant. Marin made her way to the low bench beside the table and sat carefully, her joints still stiff from yesterday's session. She didn't speak right away, just watched as Callista brought over 2 cups, setting one in front of her, the other for herself. What's in it? Marin asked, peering into the mug. Yari root, lotha bark, for nerves and grounding. You'll need both. She took a seat, folding her hands loosely around her cup. Marin exhaled. Is it that obvious? The older woman's gaze softened, only to those who know what it looks like. The front door creaked a little, and Ethan stepped in, shrugging out of his outer cloak. His expression was unreadable as always, but he walked over, set a hand on Marin's shoulder for a brief moment, and then took the seat opposite her. Marin looked between them, brow furrowing slightly. Thought you'd both be outside already. With Aran. He knows to wait, Ethan said. We needed to speak with you first. She tensed, barely. About the training? Ethan nodded. You already talked to him. I know, and I understand why. I'm actually going to stop right there because we're about to be in an ad. So I don't want to like run into the ad. So I'm going to stop and we'll pick up after the ad. Take a chance to get a drink, get a snack, stretch your legs, take a deep breath because I'm definitely going to do that. Like I said, this is a bit heavier than some of the normal chapters, but it is necessary for the story. So I will see you guys in a minute and a half. Get a drink. Alright, friends, we are back. Hope you had a chance to stretch your legs and get a snack or a drink, because I definitely needed that. Callista continued gently. You've been through more than most Jedi will ever face, and you've survived it, but preparing to face it again, deliberately, is a different matter. Hi, Lord! That totally broke the tension, thank you. Welcome in. I totally needed that laugh right now, thank you. I don't want it to happen again, Baron said, her voice quiet. But I know it could, and I want to be ready. I don't want to break again. Ethan's eyes were hard, but not unkind. You never broke. You bent, and you endured. There's a difference. Marin looked down under her tea. Maybe, but I wasn't strong enough to stop him. I don't want to feel that helpless again. You're not that girl anymore, Callista said softly, and you're not alone this time. Silence stretched for a few moments. Marin took a small sip of tea, then set the cup down carefully. You disagree with this. I hate this, Ethan admitted, but I understand it, and I won't stop you. Callista's voice remained calm, but her hands tightened around her mug. No one wants to see you relive that pain, Marika, but I know what you're doing. You're building armor that no one can take from you. Callista's Marin looked up at them both. Thank you for not stopping me, even if you want to. Ethan gave a small grunt before rising to his feet. Don't thank me until it's over. But Callista stood and reached across to touch Marin's cheek, briefly. You've already come through fire, Marin. This is just the tempering. And Marin, still tired, still uncertain, nodded once, her spine straightening just slightly as she stood to follow them towards the next step. The fire behind them crackled softly. Outside, the mountain wind had shifted, and the morning waited. Give me just a second. Okay. Greening field, just beyond the desert estate. The grass whispered under her boots as Marin stepped out from the narrow northern trail, the path she always took when the day required quiet resolve. She wore a layered tunic in the Katani style, soft slate gray with a muted blue sash. Her skirt fell to just below the knee, and her boots were laced high for movement. No lightsabers, no armor. Her hair was braided neatly down her back, the new cut, shorter, lighter, was still unfamiliar in the way it brushed her shoulders. She paused in the tree line, breathing in the cool morning air, letting the mist wrap around her like a veil. Then she stepped into the clearing. Jared turned first. His expression eased the moment he saw her, though the worry didn't vanish. He gave a slight nod, but didn't approach. He stayed at the edge of the field, watchful, present. Aran stood at the center, waiting. Marin crossed the field slowly, her gaze flicking once toward the distant ridge where the sun had begun to crest. Golden light spilled through the fog like a blessing unearned. Her voice was steady when she spoke. You said we should start early. Aran grunted softly. You slept? A little, she replied. Ethan insisted. His brow ticked up. And you listened? She didn't smile. Not quite. Eventually, she sighed. She reached the center and stood opposite him. Neither moved to shake hands. Not now. Something about the air between them had changed. Last chance to change your mind, he offered, voice low but even. She shook her head firmly. I'm here. That's the only answer I have. His jaw tightened just slightly, then listened close. He stepped forward slowly, not to intimidate, but to close the distance between them until he could see the slight tremor in her fingers, tight line of her shoulders. I'm not going to touch you. Not physically. Not yet. But I'm going to talk, and I'm going to make you doubt everything you've built around yourself. Your trust in me, in Jared, in Ethan, even in Callista, in your choices. I'm going to peel those defenses away. That's the point. Marin met his gaze without flinching. I know. No, you don't. But you will. There was no cruelty in his voice, only warning. Only the sound of someone who had once survived by doing exactly this. I'll stop if you ask, he added. That part's non-negotiable. Say the word, and I stop. Marin hesitated, then looked past him just briefly, towards Jared. He hadn't moved, but she could feel him through the forest, grounded, steady. She turned back to Aran. Let's begin. Aran nodded once and stepped back. The first words he spoke weren't hard. They weren't even loud. They weren't angry. They were just quiet enough to crawl into her ears and settle in. Christine, what did it feel like the first time you realized no one was coming? Marin blinked. She didn't answer. Not yet, but her breath pitched. The training had begun, and the mist, still clinging to the field, began to thin. Aran waited. Marin didn't answer at first. Then he added, more softly this time. You had to believe, at least for a moment, that they'd left you. She inhaled through her nose, controlled. Her gaze didn't shift from his, but her hands had closed into fists at her sides. I didn't believe that, she said, her voice carefully measured. Aran took a step closer, Not enough to enter her space, just enough to be heard over the rustle of the wind. No? Then what was the first thing you screamed? Not, help me. Not, please. You screamed a name. He paused. Jared's, wasn't it? Her lips twitched, just slightly. You screamed for someone who couldn't hear you, over and over until your throat bled, because somewhere in the back of your mind you had to believe that if he really cared, he'd find a way. Oh, she whispered, but not loud enough to halt him. It wasn't the word. You screamed for a Jedi, Aran continued, his voice still calm. You begged for a Jedi. But what you got was Deathwatch. You got silence. You got darkness. You got your braid sliced off like a trophy. Ran. You got stripped down and dragged across Durcrete by a man who enjoyed it, Ran went on, his voice tightening. Because they wanted you to believe the Jedi wouldn't come, that the Mandalorians wouldn't come, that your father's legacy died in a gutter on Galan and no one would ever remember his name. Enough. Her voice cracked. Not loud, but hoarse. She took a breath, trying to steady her balance. Her foot shifted slightly. She hadn't realized how hard she was grounding herself. I remember, she said, finally. Aran was quiet. I remember every second, Aran continued. I remember the sound of the restraints. I remember the burn marks on my wrists. I remember thinking Ethan was dead, that Jared had moved on, that Stefan wouldn't come. I remember all of it. Her eyes lifted. No longer defensive, just open. But I also remember when they did come. She stepped forward now, her tone low and fierce. You can keep throwing words like knives, but I won't fall for it. Not this time. Not again. Ryan didn't speak for a moment. He looked at her carefully, assessing, watching the tension shift through her shoulders, the way her pulse beat fast at her throat, but her spine held straight. That's the point, he said, finally. He turned and walked away a few paces, slow and deliberate, before stopping with his back to her. That's how it begins, he said. We call it the break when it works. But you didn't break. You burned. That's rarer. He looked over his shoulder, his eyes dark but no longer needling. Just honest. You're going to need that when this happens again, because it will happen again, Marin. You don't belong in a tower. You walk into fire. She nodded once, quietly. I know. From the edge of the clearing, Jared had started forward during the worst of it. He hadn't stepped in, but his presence had surged in the forest like a rising wave, ready if Marin had said one word. He hadn't. Now Orion looked between them, then toward the tree line. I'm calling the session here, he said. That's enough for today. Marin was trembling slightly now, not from fear, but from effort. She hadn't cried, she hadn't screamed, but she'd bled something out of herself, quiet and unseen. As Orion walked past her, he said in a low voice, almost reluctantly, if it ever does happen again, scream my name instead. And then he was gone, slipping into the mist beyond the ridge, leaving Marin alone at the center of the field. Sorry. Jared stepped forward slowly. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. Marin turned and walked towards him. Her breathing was shallow but even. He reached out as she came close, and without a word, she leaned into his chest. Just for a moment. She wasn't broken, but something had shifted. Jared didn't speak as he walked beside her, his hand still resting gently at the center of her back. They didn't head back to the estate immediately. Instead, Marin paused at the edge of the ridge, where the pines thinned and the view opened below, toward the valley, toward the place she'd once called a grave. She stared out over it now, silent. You did well, Jared said, finally. His voice was quiet, and the words were careful. Not comforting, not dismissive, just real. Marin didn't look at him right away. Her fingers tightened slightly at the edge of her sleeve. It didn't feel like it. That's not the same thing, he replied. She exhaled softly and looked down. He went for Bastine. He paused. He knew the exact second I started to doubt, not just that someone would come, but that I even deserved to be rescued.
Hey
Hey, Marmy, welcome in. I am well this evening. Oh, sorry. Reading some heavy stuff. Oh, give me a chance to take a water break. Oh. Jared's expression tightened. I know. We didn't press that far. Not yet. But he'll get there. He nodded, watching her closely. And when he does, you'll be ready for it, or closer to ready than you were before. I wanted to hit him. Jared almost smiled. But you didn't. No, she said. But I wanted to. He didn't say she would be forgiven. He didn't need to. Instead, he reached up and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear where it had fallen loose. Come on, he said. Let's get you back. You're overdue for food, and Callista's going to pretend she isn't watching from the kitchen. Smiled faintly, just for a heartbeat. I knew it! They turned together and made their way down the path. Jared, a quiet, steady presence at her side, like a blade sheathed for now, but never far. I appreciate the offer, Marby. Unfortunately, I don't accept friend requests from people I don't know right off. So, thank you. Figure out where I left off. Thank you. Here we go. Lost my place there for a second. Ethan stood with his arms folded, his gaze fixed toward the forest clearing below. Callista stood nearby, just inside the open doors of the hearth room, her fingers curling loosely around a cup of steaming tea. The light caught the strands of silver in her dark blonde hair as the wind stirred through it. She didn't shatter, Ethan said, finally. Callista didn't look at him right away. No, but she did bleed. I don't like it, he added, putting her through this. She asked for it. I know she did. He rubbed a hand on the side of his face, frustrated. But you saw her. That moment when Iran brought up Bastine, I saw her brace like she was back on the parking floor. Callista's gaze softened as she looked out towards the ridge. And you also saw her stand. Ethan was quiet for a long time. Think she's ready for this? He asked, finally. No, Callista answered honestly. Not yet, but she's closer than she was 2 weeks ago. She's choosing to confront it now instead of locking it away. Ethan's jaw worked slightly. Shouldn't have had to confront it in the first place. No, she shouldn't have. But she did, and she survived, and that's something no one can take from her. A breath passed between them, laden with shared memories, old wounds, and unspoken regrets. Then Ethan exhaled through his nose. Iran's going to push harder tomorrow. He'll stop if she truly needs him to. And if she doesn't know when to stop? Ethan asked. You've seen her. She doesn't quit, not even when it nearly kills her. Callista looked down at her tea, then back at Ethan. That's why you and I are here, she said softly. He glanced at her, confused. To catch her if she falls? No, Callista replied. To remind her why she needs to stand. The hearth fire crackled low in the great room of the Durza estate, casting flickering shadows across the stone walls. It was late. The stars were already scattered like dust beyond the tall windows, yet no one had gone to sleep. Marin sat on the edge of one of the long cushioned benches, a warm wrap drawn around her shoulders. Her tunics had been exchanged for a soft katani skirt and blouse. Her braid was gone, cut weeks earlier by Andrea's hand. Her posture had changed since then, straighter, quieter, not in a way that dulled her presence, but in the way a flame burns lower to last longer. Jared sat beside her, one hand loosely curled near hers on the cushion, not quite touching, but near enough she could feel the warmth. Ethan leaned in the archway, his arms crossed. Callista occupied one of the chairs, her legs tucked beneath her and her gaze ever watchful. Aran was across from Marin, nursing a mug of spiced tea with a faint expression of someone trying to piece together a star map written in 5 different dialects. So, she said, cautiously, let me make sure I've got this right. He raised a finger with each point. You're a Jedi Knight. You're a Mandalorian. You trained at the Praxium under Andrea, who is Katani, and a princess. And you're also, what, some kind of noble? Ethan snorted softly, and Callista tilted her head, but it was Marin who raised an eyebrow. Why does that confuse you? She asked, half amused, half exasperated. He gestured vaguely at her, because most people would have gone half mad trying to juggle even one of those ideas, much less all 3. And you switch between them like they're robes on a rack. Jedi in the morning, Mandalorian when sparring, Katani when hosting. I don't get how you keep it all straight. I don't, always, Marin admitted, tugging at the wrap closer. Some days it's harder. I used to think I had to pick one. Be just Jedi or just Mandalorian. Forget the rest. But that wasn't the truth. Not for me. She tried, Ethan added from the wall, his voice low. Tried cutting off parts of herself to make others more comfortable. That didn't last long. Callista nodded once, her tone gentler. And she paid for it, on Bastine, in ways I hope none of you ever have to learn. Orian's expression sobered. I've seen what happens when someone tries to break their own shape to fit someone else's mold. It's not pretty. It isn't, Marin agreed. But Catan taught me something different. It's not about losing yourself to serve. It's about becoming strong enough to stand with others. You learn to honor the past without being owned by it. To grow. And the noble thing? Oran asked, still puzzled. I didn't realize Jedi were allowed to... I don't hold a title, Marin interrupted quietly. Not officially, anyway. But here, the Durza name carries weight. My father helped defend this land during the first Deathwatch uprisings in the sector. He made it his own. When he died, I didn't just inherit his armor, I inherited the responsibility that came with it. The colonists remember. You carry his name, Ethan said, unfolding his arms. That's enough. Oran looked at her differently then, not with doubt, but with something closer to wary admiration. It still seems like a lot to shoulder. It is, Oran said honestly, but I'm not alone. Not anymore. Jared finally spoke, his voice warm but wry. And some of us are more stubborn than others when it comes to staying by her side. Marin glanced at him, and the brief smile that touched her lips held gratitude and something quieter beneath. I never asked to be all of these things, she said softly. But I won't give them up, either. Not Catan, not the Praxium, not the clans. They made me. And if I can't be all of them, then maybe I don't deserve any of it. Oran exhaled slowly, processing that. Do you ever get tired of carrying all of it? All the time, Marin whispered, but I carried anyway. The silence that followed was companionable, respectful, even. Even Oran, ever the skeptic, bowed his head slightly in acknowledgement. Ethan finally pushed off the wall and walked to the sideboard, pouring himself something dark and bitter. Well, he muttered, that's enough identity philosophy for one night. You look and start reciting poetry if you want. I'll be on the veranda. Coward, Callista said fondly as she stood and followed him out. Marin stayed behind a moment longer with Jared and Oran, the fire low but still warm. I meant what I said, Oran added quietly as they stood to follow. There's a place for someone like me in all this. Stay. There is, Marin said, if you want it. They left together, 3 different warriors, bound by loyalty and something stronger than titles. And far above, the stars of Tanagas kept their silent watch. Just 1 second, guys. Sorry. That cough that was plaguing me earlier is back a little bit. Thank you for the DM, Lord. I appreciate you. We have an ad starting in just under 5 minutes. Oops. Sorry about that. The fire in the hearth had burned down to embers, but neither Mare nor Jared had made a move to leave. The silence between them was gentle, earned, not awkward. Marin rested against the cushioned arm of the bench, her legs folded beneath her, the wrap from earlier still draped around her shoulders. Jared sat nearby, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, watching the last flickers of flame dance across the stones. "Stayed quiet earlier," Marin murmured. Jared glanced at her, a faint smile touching his lips. "I've learned to pick my moments." "Since when?" she asked, mock skeptical. "Since realizing I wasn't the one who had to speak for you anymore." He sat back slightly. "You held your ground just fine." She hummed, considering that. It still feels strange saying all of that out loud, owning it. Catan, Mandalore, the Order. "But you did." He shifted a bit closer, his voice softening. "And not just to Iran, to yourself." She nodded slowly. "It helps, having you here." Jared tilted his head. "Even when Ethan's still not quite sure whether he trusts me?" "You're not here for his approval." Marin's smile was small, but true. "Do I think he's warming to you?" "Maybe," Jared muttered. "He hasn't tried to throw me off the veranda yet, so I'll count that as progress." Marin laughed softly, and the sound eased at something inside his chest. "Stay with me a little longer?" she asked. "Always." He leaned back against the cushions, and after a moment, Marin shifted to rest against his shoulder. They sat like that, wordless, as the hearth dimmed further and the sounds of the estate settled into nighttime stillness. Elsewhere in the estate, Iran sat alone on the veranda, gazing up the pale moon in the sky. He hadn't slept. His mind was too full. The training sessions had shaken more out of him than he wanted to admit. Not the pain. That was manageable, expected even. But the emotional strain of letting go, of Marin trusting someone else to take control of her mind, her fear, her memories, had stripped away layers he didn't know were still clinging to him. He didn't regret it. Not exactly. But it left him feeling adrift. He'd seen the strength in Marin. Not the kind taught in combat drills or etched in armor, but something else. Something earned. She moved through fire and came out changed, but not lost. She didn't just endure. She remembered who she was afterward. And that made him want to understand more, especially about the people who had helped shape her into that. So with little more than instinct guiding him, he rose and crossed the silent halls until he found Callista seated near the kitchen arch, a mug of something herbal in her hands and a data pad in her lap. Ethan stood nearby, his arms folded, half shadowed by the low lighting. Iran hesitated before he stepped into the room. "Can't sleep?" Callista asked without looking up. "I didn't try," he answered. Ethan gave a grunt that might have been agreement or judgment. He wasn't sure. "I've been thinking," Iran said, "about the training and about this place, these people, what it means to be Katane." Ethan's head lifted slightly at that. "I don't just mean the formality or the fencing drills or the phrases Marin uses when she switches tone. I mean all of it. The quiet dignity, the expectation of care, of memory, that people belong to their past but also carry it forward." Callista set the datapad down and looked at him fully. "You're asking to be taught." Iran nodded once. "If you'll have me. I don't want to be another blade in someone's shadow. Not anymore." Ethan considered him for a long moment and then pushed off the wall. "You want to learn the Katani ways?" "I do." "Then you start by listening, watching, You'll eat when they do, speak only when you mean something. And when we visit the shrine, you won't ask questions, not until you feel the answer. Blista's voice was softer. And when you falter, we won't carry you, but we won't turn you away either. Aran bowed his head in quiet respect. That's all I ask. Ethan stepped past him, pausing with a hand on his shoulder. Not quite warm, but not dismissal either. You still train Marin tomorrow? I'm gonna stop there because we're about to be in an ad. Thank you guys for hanging out. Go take a minute and a half, get a drink, get a snack, take a break. Why is my camera being a pain? I don't know, my camera decided it didn't want to focus. See ya in a minute and a half, guys. Alrighty, we are back, friends. Thanks for sticking it out through those ads. I appreciate you. Please make sure you guys are hydrating. It's hot here. It's probably about 90, so if you see me drinking a lot of water, that's why. I don't want to pass out from heat stroke. It would be bad. Okay. Ethan stepped past him then, pausing with a hand on his shoulder. Not quite warm, but not dismissal either. You'll still train Marin tomorrow? I will. Then I'll speak to Stefan. He left the room without another word, leaving Aran alone with Ballista. She rose, crossing to refill her cup, and paused beside him. She's changed since Bastine, she said quietly, but she's not broken, and she trusts you. I know, Aran replied, his voice low. That's why I won't let her down. Ballista smiled slightly and moved off, her steps quiet and unobtrusive. Aran lingered in the soft lamplight of the hall, gazing toward the quiet corridor that led back to the guest wing. Tomorrow would come. He would be ready. But tonight, under a sky full of memory and weight, he allowed himself to simply exist. The wind was gentle that night, brushing softly against the slatted shutters of the Durza estate. Marin had left the balcony doors ajar, letting the scent of pine drift into her room. It was one of the rare nights when peace didn't feel like something to be guarded or stolen. It was simply present, warm, whole, and quiet. She sat near the hearth, her legs curled beneath her, her head resting on Jared's shoulder. He was half asleep already, his arm draped loosely around her waist, breathing steady, calmly. She wore one of her simpler tunics, comfort woven in the Katani style. No armor, no sigils, just herself. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, she didn't need to guard herself. Jared stirred slightly, his voice low and quiet. You're thinking too loud again. Marin smiled slightly. You always say that. Because it's true, he murmured, his eyes still closed. You shift when you're anxious, pull at your sleeves when you're unsure. You haven't moved for 10 minutes. That's how I know your mind's going somewhere. She let the silence stretch for a moment before speaking. Do you really think that people can change? Jared opened one eye, gazing sideways at her. You mean Iran? Marin nodded. Jared sat up a little and stretched, drawing his legs out beside hers. He's not who he was. That much is clear. But change doesn't erase everything that came before. You're not asking whether he's different. You're asking whether you should trust him. She hesitated. I want to. I see something in him, but it feels like the galaxy is holding its breath. Like, if I choose wrong, then you'll fix it, Jared said. Like you always do. You don't need to have the perfect answer, Marin. You just need to decide which truth you're going to walk towards. She looked at him then, truly looked, and then she nodded. You're better at this than you let on. Only with you, he said, smiling softly. They curled beneath the blanket on the wide bench near the window, the fire burning low, the stars drifting slowly across the mountain sky. Jared's breath evened out again, his arms resting against her hip. And Marin let her thoughts quiet. But sometime in the night, the veil of peace shifted. She stood, not in the warmth of the hearth room, but within the shrine her father had built deep in the estate. Only now it was colder, darker. The candles were unlit, the walls breathed in memory. Darius Durza stood in the center, wearing his old armor, blue and gray. Unpainted now. There were streaks of ash across the vambrace as his helmet hung at his side. Marin took a step forward. Go here. He didn't smile. His voice was quiet, testing. You gave him shelter. I did. He was Kirtsad. He isn't anymore. He studied her, the lines of his face harder in shadow. Would you have said the same about Joran? Marin flinched. No, because Joran never asked for anything but my death. Aran surrendered. He gave up everything he knew. Would he do the same under fire? Would he choose you? Or what he was trained to be? The vision twisted slightly. The walls of the shrine fading into mist, flashes of red and steel echoing where memory met fear. I don't know, she admitted. Jerry stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. Then find out before it's too late. She swallowed. Is this a warning? It's a test, he said gently, but not of him. And then he was gone. Marin's eyes opened slowly. She was still nestled against Jared's shoulder, his hand now resting over hers. His fingers curled gently in his sleep. The room was still, light from the embers tracing soft lines along the far wall. She hadn't moved. Not outward, but the dream, the vision, had carved something deep into her. Jared stirred. His eyes opened slowly, the force already stirring between them. You okay? He whispered. I saw my father, she said quietly. Jared sat up now, fully alert, his hand brushing against hers. A vision? She nodded. He was questioning me. Not about the path, about Iran. Jared was quiet. He's worried you'll be hurt again. Marin leaned her head against his shoulder. So am I. They didn't speak for a long time after that. The night stretched onward, unfolding not with answers, but with understanding. And in the stillness, Marin made a promise she didn't speak aloud. She would learn the truth, whatever it cost. That's the end of chapter 12, guys. We might get done by 10? Maybe? I'm hoping. Really hoping. We've got 2 more chapters to go. Good 1 second. Alrighty. Chapter 13. Catan, the Praxium. The winds off Mount Adon carried the sharp scent of pine and stone, rushing across the paved courtyard at the heart of the Praxium. Morning light filtered through the layered clouds, casting long shadows between the training spires and meditation halls. It was quiet, peaceful, but the air still carried weight. Not the weight of danger, but of decisions waiting to be made. Stefan stood near the edge of the overlook behind the main council hall, arms folded, his gaze distant. Below him, the forests of Catan stretched out in layered green and mist, the great cliffs that marked the edge of the Card estate rising behind the grounds like sentinels. The quiet steps behind him weren't a surprise. "You're late, Sharon," he said without turning. "You were always late." Sharon laughed lightly as she approached, her dark robes catching the wind. Her posture was elegant, upright, precise in a way that only Jedi intelligence could ever seem to manage, even off-duty. Her brown eyes held a sharpness honed by decades of reading both data and people. "And yet, you always wait. That's trust, my friend." He glanced at her sideways, the corner of his mouth tugging upward. "Or foolishness. Same thing, someday." They stood together in silence for a few moments. Sharon didn't press. She never had to. Stefan would speak when he was ready. Finally, he did. "The council has left it in my hands," he said, the wind pulling at his cloak. "Whether to assign her to Jedi intelligence or to name her Watchman of Tanagas." Sharon's expression softened. "You knew this would come." "Aye." He looked out again, as if he could see all the way to Tanagas from this height. "But I thought I'd have more time." "Time won't make the choice easier," she said, gently. "You trained her. You know what she's capable of." "I know what it cost her," he clarified. Sharon nodded. "We all do. But that doesn't mean she should be held back from what she was meant to do." He turned to face her then, his voice quiet but firm. "You've read the reports. You've seen what she's endured. The injuries, the capture, Laurel, Vestine, Coruscant. I wasn't there to stop any of it." "You weren't meant to be." Her voice was just as firm. "She survived. More than that, she still chooses to serve. That's not weakness, Stefan. That's strength." He exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders tightening rather than easing. "If she joins intelligence, you'll put her where?" Sharon hesitated, but a moment. "Off-grid assignments, target coordination, deep reconnaissance and counter-infiltration. She's built for it. Adaptable, quiet, and resilient. And she has a mind for tactics. She could lead her own team in a year. Less, even. And if I keep her here, make her Watchman of Tanagas, she'll still be in danger. Maybe different kinds, maybe more personal." Sharon paused, "but she'll be rooted. You know what Tanagas means to her, to Ethan, to Callista. She can build something there, protect it, defend the colony before the next storm hits." Stefan nodded. He knew all of this, but there was still hesitation in his heart. "She carries too many ghosts," he said softly. Sharon looked at him then help her honor that. The silence that followed was heavy, but not without hope. The two Jedi stood on the edge of the overlook, the wind whispering around them. Finally, Stefan reached inside his cloak and pulled out a folded datapad keyed to Marin's secure file. "Both," he said at last. "Watchman for the Tanaga system and liaison to Jedi intelligence. Field work only, when the Council approves." Sharon smiled faintly. "She'll be pleased." She'll argue. All the best Jedi do. He allowed himself a small chuckle. Tell her in person when you can. She deserves to hear it from someone who understands the cost. I will. Darren turned back towards the path that led through the Praxium's inner garden. And Stefan, thank you. For what? For trusting her. He didn't answer right away. As the wind picked up again, Stefan looked out at the rising sun, its light finally beginning to warm the eastern cliffs. She earned that trust long before I even realized it. And far below, in a world still healing, a young Jedi stood with one foot in the past and the other poised on the edge of everything yet to come. August 5, the Durza Estate. The galaxy doesn't wait for certainty, only for choice. The soft chime of the holocom cut through the quiet. Marin blinked, herself awake, still curled on the padded bench beneath the sitting room window where the late afternoon sun cast flickering shadows of pine boughs across the floor. Her tunic was rumpled, a katani shawl half slipped from her shoulders. She had fallen asleep reading. Again. Ethan's voice called from the far room. It's for you. She groaned softly and rose, brushing her braid behind her shoulder before stepping into the small, calm alcove. The image flickered for a second before stabilizing to the crisp, unmistakable form of Jedi Knight Sharon Oren, head of intelligence. Knight Durza, Sharon said, her voice smooth and unreadable. You're not busy, are you? Marin tried to smile, but it came out weary. Only recovering. You'll forgive me for interrupting. I was on Catan this morning. I spoke with Master Card. He's made his decision. Marin's breath caught. She felt the quiet lurch in her chest and sat down slowly. I see. I'd rather speak in person. I'm en route now. Shuttle arrives in an hour. Your estate is still shielded, yes? Marin nodded. It is. I'll have the perimeter cleared for you. Sharon's image dipped its head once. Then I'll see you shortly. The comm went dark. The hour passed quickly. Too quickly. Marin stood near the stone walkway outside the main entry where the shuttle broke the tree line, descending in a slow, controlled arc before settling gently on the estate's permacrete apron outside the main hangar. Sharon stepped down with a long, precise stride, her dark travel cloak belted tightly, lightsaber clipped at her side. No entourage, just business. They met with a quiet clasp of forearms. You look older, Sharon said quietly. You sound surprised. I'm not. Just acknowledging what survival costs. Marin gestured toward the outer veranda. This way. They sat beneath the overhang, the forest whispering around them. Sharon placed a small holoprojector on the table between them. Didn't activate it. Not yet. Master Card believes your trials are complete, it began, and the Council agrees. You've done what many couldn't. Survived Bestine, fought for the colonies, defended the Praxium. And yet, her gaze sharpened, you're still standing. Marin didn't speak. She didn't need to. Sharon continued after a moment to let that sink in. You were right to say your skills lie with intelligence, your instincts, your adaptability, your tenacity. We need people like you. Marin's jaw tensed, but she said nothing. The Council has approved a joint assignment. Watchman for Tanagas, intelligence liaison for field operations. Sharon tapped the device once and let the words hang in the air. The duties will be tailored to your strengths. You'll serve locally, but with reach. Finally, Marin leaned forward. You make it sound like a clean divide. It won't be. No, Sharon agreed. It won't. She tapped the holoprojector and the image flickered to life. A younger Marin, maybe 12, was standing in the Katani spring grass. Her hair was shorter, her eyes wider, and her expression caught somewhere between wary and hopeful. Beside her, Jerry stood with one arm across her shoulders. The moment was still, gentle, frozen in time. Marin stared. I had it pulled from the intelligence archives, Sharon said softly. Taken during your first month on Catan. It's yours. Marin's finger brushed the edge of the projector. Why show me this now? Marin leaned back slightly, watching her with keen eyes. Because you're about to choose a new path, and I thought it might help you remember who you've always been. Marin didn't answer at first. Her voice, when it came, was quiet. I need time. I'll return to Catan tomorrow. Sharon gave a single nod. Of course. I expected as much. That night, Marin stood once more beneath the stars over Mount Adan. The Wyrda had carried her back in silence, and she'd walked the final slope alone, past the halls and gardens she once trained in, past the quiet dormitories where young initiates now dreamed of glory. Found Jared in one of the meditation alcoves, his lightsaber laid beside him, his hands folded. He looked up when he heard her footsteps. I thought you might come, he said. Marin didn't smile. I needed to talk. He nodded and motioned for her to come closer. She sat beside him on the smooth stone bench, her cloak trailing behind her. I spoke with Sharon, she said. I figured. Jared's gaze didn't leave her face. And? They've offered me both. Watchman, intelligence, local assignments, mostly. I haven't accepted yet. He was quiet for a long moment. What's stopping you? She sighed. I don't know. Maybe nothing. Maybe much. He turned towards her then. I'm being considered for watchman of my home system. She blinked. You didn't tell me. I haven't decided yet. They also offered me intelligence, but I didn't want to leave you. The admission settled between them like something fragile and bright. Always had your own path, she whispered. So have you. He reached over, his hand finding hers. But I'd rather walk mine beside you. For the first time in hours, Marin smiled. Just faintly. I'll decide soon, she said. No rush, he replied. We'll find the right path. And above them the stars burned as they always had. Quiet, unchanging, eternal. Sorry, guys. The capital city of Catan, Edmonton, shimmered beneath the early afternoon sun. Cobbled streets and arching skyways wove between domed towers and green-roofed pavilions, the bustle muted by the calming tones of the city's distinct Catani design, quiet, reserved, and refined. Marin adjusted her satchel as she stepped through the broad courtyard of the royal palace with Jared beside her. The place hadn't changed in the years since she'd first stood here with Andrea, still pristine, though slightly overwhelming. She dressed with care this time, a traditional Kotani skirt and tunic in muted teal and gray. Her saber nestled quietly at her back. Jared, ever silent but attentive, followed her lead with a respectful air, his robes cut in darker blue and slate gray, banding on the tunics, more formal than the gear he wore when out in the field. Andrea met them in the sun-drenched reception hall, her dark hair swept back and her stance ever poised. There was pride in her eyes when she saw them, perhaps even something wistful. You look like yourself again, Andrea said softly, drawing Marin into an embrace. I feel like I'm starting to remember who that is, Marin admitted, and I thought, before I said anything to the others, I should come here. Andrea arched an eyebrow. You've made your decision. Marin nodded. The council's assignment, I've accepted. Watchman for Tanagas and intelligence alongside Jared. Andrea's eyes lingered briefly on the young Jedi Knight at Marin's side before she smiled. That will put you in a unique position, Marin, but it suits you. I think your father would have said the same. Marin swallowed and then nodded. I hope so. Andrea reached forward, touching Marin's shoulder gently. I don't need to tell you how rare this is. Most Jedi would walk one path, but the Council knows what you've come through and what lies ahead. After a few more words and a quiet exchange with Jared, who, even in more formality, managed a dry observation that drew a smile from Andrea, they left the palace behind and made their way into Edmonton's lower levels. Sorry. A tav calf sat near a tram junction, its terrace tucked into a courtyard blooming with scarlet-leaved trees. Ethan, Bevan, and Callista Jassarin were already there. Marin spotted them first. Ethan was leaned back with arms crossed, his expression unreadable, while Callista cradled a ceramic mug between her palms. She wore civilian clothes today, not robes, a soft linen tunic beneath a long cloak, her gaze tracking Marin and Jared as they approached. Sorry about that. Needed some water. You're late, Ethan grunted, even as he rose from his seat. Only by a few minutes, Marin said lightly, but there was tension in her voice. She slid into a seat across from them, Jared settling beside her in a quiet mirror of Ethan's posture. Callista's gaze was warm, but searching. So, she asked. Marin drew in a breath. I've accepted the watchman post for Tanagas and the intelligence assignment with Jared. Ethan raised a brow. Both? Marin nodded. Yes, but the council left the decision with Master Card. He agreed with Sharon's proposal. There was a long pause. And then Ethan's voice dropped an octave. So, you'll be going into the field. Together. We will, Marin said, her voice even. And what else are you deciding together? Ethan's tone wasn't sharp, but it wasn't soft either. He looked between them, his eyes narrowed. You've been circling this for years. Marin stiffened, but Jared spoke before she could. We've never hidden what we are, he said. But we've respected the line. We've waited. We've earned this. And I would never let my bond with her interfere with the mission or the order. Ethan's expression didn't soften, but his gaze held something else now, measured calculation. Maybe even reluctant acceptance. Callista's hand settled gently on his. He's not a child anymore, nor Cartha. And he's not the kind of man who would treat her lightly. Marin swallowed. We don't need your blessing. But I do want your trust. The silence hung for a few moments, and then Ethan exhaled, long and slow. I taught you to fight for what matters, he said. I suppose I can't complain now that you've taken me at my word. He reached across the table, his calloused fingers settling briefly on Marin's forearm, and then he shifted his gaze to Jared. If you ever make her regret this, I don't care what rank you hold, I will end you. Jared nodded once. Understood. Ethan leaned back again, satisfied for the moment. Callista only smiled. So, Watchman Durza, she said softly. Welcome home. Okay. We have an ad starting in 2.5 minutes. Okay. The Durza estate. A day later. The Wurza descended quietly into the northern mountain range of Tanagas 5, the vast expanse of forested ridgelines and the glint of distant rivers emerging through the morning mist. The Durza estate stood nestled beneath a canopy of ancient trees, its stone halls and metal accents reflecting the sun in muted tones. Marin stepped off the ramp first, inhaling deeply. The breeze was cold here, laced with the pine and earth. She adjusted her satchel, the blue and black praxium tunic replaced now by a soft slate skirt and cream tunic in the Katani style. Practical. Comfortable. She'd left her former robes aboard the Wurda and braided her hair back from her face. The severed Padawan braid, now a memory tucked into a drawer in her room. Sorry, that's loud. Iran was already waiting when she reached the training ground, a clearing of packed earth tucked into the forest floor behind the estate. He stood with arms folded, dressed in a simple shirt and black trousers, his eyes shadowed by the hood he'd drawn forward. You're late, he said. Not harshly, just a statement. I'm here, aren't I? Marin replied as she rolled her shoulders. Fair. He reached over to the equipment case beside him and opened it. Today is going to be a little different. Her eyes flicked to the contents. A blindfold, earplugs, a stunner set to low power, pulse emitter rigged for directional disorientation. You're going to strip my senses. He nodded. Piece by piece. Then push. See how long you last. How you react. How you fight back. Marin's voice was quiet. Ethan and Callista agreed. They hate it, Iran admitted. But they understand. and they trust me to stop it before it breaks you. There was a beat of silence, then Marin stepped forward and picked up the blindfold. Then let's begin. We have an ad starting in about 20 seconds, so I'm actually gonna hold off there. You guys really should take a break. I don't know what's going on with the camera. Okay. Got about 5 seconds until our ad starts. Go ahead and take a break. Have a stretch. Grab a drink. Grab a snack. Because I'm definitely gonna do that. I'll see you guys in a minute and a half. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you took a chance to actually take a break, because I did. Definitely helps. Darkness, silence, cold. The blindfold had gone on first, then the earplugs, then the emitter, pulsing at irregular intervals, sending waves of disorientation through her bones, throwing off her sense of space and gravity. Her breath caught as she stumbled to one knee. She tried to remember how long it had been. Time blurred. She could no longer tell if the sounds she heard were imagined or real. Iran's voice sometimes reached her in snatches, sometimes not at all. Sometimes the emitter screamed through her thoughts like fire. Her skin prickled as low-grade sunner blast danced across her arms and back. She didn't scream. She bit her lip until she tasted blood. Then suddenly, nothing. Stillness. The emitter had shut off. She knelt there, breathing shallow and ragged, sweat dripping down her spine. Then a hand touched her shoulder. Steady. Not cruel. You're done for now, Ren said quietly. She didn't move right away. She couldn't. He crouched beside her and carefully pulled the blindfold away. Her eyes, bloodshot and dazed, flinched against the late afternoon light. Her voice, when it came, was hoarse. How long? 3 hours, Ren told her gently. You made it longer than most do on their first time. Aaron stared straight ahead, the world slowly returning. Sounds took shape again. Wind, birds, her own heartbeat. Then, footsteps. Ethan's boots crunched over the gravel and Callista wasn't far behind. Neither of them spoke at first. Ethan's jaw was tight. He'd seen too many interrogations in his time. But Callista was the one who knelt in front of her. Shaking, she whispered. Marin blinked. Still here? Yes, you are. She helped Marin to her feet. She leaned slightly, just enough that Jared, who had arrived behind them without fanfare, moved to her side. He wrapped his cloak around her shoulders and murmured something she couldn't quite catch. Didn't need to. His presence was enough. Iran remained behind for a moment, gathering the equipment with mechanical precision, but Ethan stepped beside him, speaking quietly. "She trusts you," the older man said. Iran's voice was low as he responded. "I know. Just remember, this isn't about how far she can go. It's about who she is when she comes back." Iran nodded, though the thought of truth weighing heavily. That's what I'm trying to protect. The lights were dim in the hearth room, a soft amber glow from the recessed sconces flickering against stone walls, worn smooth by time. The fire had long since burned down to glowing coals, but warmth still lingered. Marin lay curled on the wide settee, finally asleep after hours spent shaking off the worst of the session. A blanket, Jared's cloak actually, had been pulled over her shoulders. She hadn't even stirred when he adjusted it. Jared sat close beside her, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped together. His eyes never strayed from her face. Callista stood at the window nearby, arms folded, watching the trees sway in the wind beyond the estate's edge. The moonlight cast long shadows over the hearth tiles, tracing the line of her silhouette. She fought to stay awake, Jared said quietly. She was trying to prove something. Callista didn't turn. She usually is. There was a beat of silence. I hated watching it, Jared admitted. Every instinct I had was screaming to stop it. But you didn't. No, because you know what it's for. Jared exhaled, his shoulders sagging. That doesn't make it any easier. Callista finally turned towards him, her eyes soft but no less firm. It's not supposed to be. There's no honor in forging strength through cruelty, Jared. But there is truth in forging resilience with purpose. His jaw clenched slightly. I keep thinking about what she's already survived. Bastine, Coruscant, and she's just... still walking. She's more than walking, Callista murmured. She's choosing. Jared looked down at Marin's hand, loosely curled over the edge of the blanket. How did she get so strong? Callista stepped closer, kneeling beside them on the rug. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Because she knows what it feels like to be powerless. She remembers it. She never wants to go back there. That's what makes her dangerous to the people who built this war. Jared nodded softly. She told me once that it wasn't just surviving Bastine that changed her. It was what came after. Healing, the patience, the voices that didn't give up on her. Callista placed a hand gently on Marin's blanket-covered arm. She thinks she walks alone, but we know better. Jared smiled faintly. She'll deny it, but she knows it too. Callista straightened. Rest while she does. Tomorrow will be much harder. Jared's gaze drifted towards the fire. How much harder are we talking? Callista sighed softly, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Mental breaks, false memories, phantom sounds. The point isn't to hurt her, it's to make her recognize the lies when they come. And Iran knows what he's doing? Callista hesitated, but only for a moment. He's been careful, more than I expected, and he checks in every time he goes too far. Jared looked down at Marin again. She trusts him. She also trusts you. That's not something she gives lightly. I won't let her fall, he said. Not a promise, just a fact. I know. Neither will I. They stayed there for a while longer, the three of them surrounded by flickering shadows and quiet strength. Fire stirred once more, casting a deeper glow over Marin's sleeping face. She didn't stir, but her breathing, at last, was even. Tomorrow would come soon enough, but for tonight they watched over her together. The night was cool, the wind winding its way between the trees above the Durza estate. Aran sat cross-legged just outside the bunker where he'd first been held. He hadn't returned here, not since Stefan had cleared him to remain under Marin's care. But he liked the vantage it gave, over the forest line, the rising stars, and the trails that wound down toward the southern cliffs. The grass whispered beneath him, his gauntlets lay beside him, his boots, too, were once. Bare feet grounded him better to the soil. The weight of what came next hadn't escaped him. He exhaled slowly, not to calm himself, but to listen. He did that often now, listening not just for footsteps, but for shifts in the force, the way leaves moved when something wasn't quite right. It wasn't Jedi intuition, just years of being hunted and hunting in return. He wasn't a Jedi, but she was. And this next part would be hell for her. He remembered the first time he broke. First time Duran's handlers, those carking bastards, locked him in a soundless room for 2 days, playing recordings of his father's voice twisted into threats. Fake, yes, but believable enough to make his teenage mind falter. That had been the first time he'd screamed, not in pain, but in doubt. It wasn't the injuries that unmade you, it was the uncertainty of what was real. He picked up a data chip from the grass, a small one, a standard Katani recorder. Callista had provided a set of holograms earlier that day, with Ethan's reluctant consent. Echoes from Marin's own past, not real, but damaging in themselves. Waited. Her father, her time on Catan, the warehouse on Galan, Estine. Sights and sounds she remembered so clearly that could be twisted into uncertainty. He didn't want to use them, but she'd asked him to. Isita, he murmured under his breath, his eyes closing. Marin, I hope you understand why this matters. I don't know if we'll get to chapter 14 tonight. See. Maybe? We might. The next morning, the training room. The chamber they'd prepared was beneath the main estate. Converted old cellar, long since turned into a meditation hall. It had a vaulted ceiling and reinforced walls. Silence was heavy. No external light, only the soft white glow of embedded sconces set to flicker unpredictably. Marin entered quietly, dressed in her training tunic again, her hair braided and pinned up. She gave a short nod to Ethan, who stood at the door, arms crossed, but he was silent. Aran waited in the center of the chamber. He was already seated. 2 chairs sat nearby, the low table between them now cleared. One of the chairs was hers, the other. McCoy, Aran said evenly, you still sure about this? Sure as I'll ever be. Marin's voice was calm, but not without nerves. Let's begin. He nodded once and gestured to the chair. He sat. The lights dimmed further, shifting into a cycle of faint pulses. Aran slid the recorder onto the table. You'll see 3 visuals. They'll be familiar, but none are real. Not now. That's the first thing to remember. She gave a short nod, and then he activated the projector. First was of Galan. Same street she'd run through after her father's death, except this time there were figures in the firelight. One she didn't recognize. One with her old saber hilt, another with a Deathwatch insignia not from her past. She blinked hard. Second image was of her room in the Praxium, except it was as it had been the night of the vision. Her pillow was stained, her sheets were tangled, her own voice echoed, "Aaron, I'm sorry," but twisted. Not her father's voice, her own. Aaron flinched. Aran didn't speak. He simply watched. Third image was of Tanagas, her home, but ruined and covered in ash, and the Werda, scorched, broken open. Aaron stood, suddenly, one hand trembling. That's enough. But there was no recording anymore. The image continued and she turned sharply, facing a corner where someone had moved. Jared? But the voice that answered was a distortion of his. Aran moved then, quickly but calm, hand on her shoulder, rounding her. Not real. She gasped. I know that. He held her steady, fingers firm but not unkind. You're not alone, Marin. Focus. Remember who brought you back. Callista, Ethan, Jared, Stefan, and, she swallowed hard, myself. He nodded once. The illusions faded. She stood there, breathing hard, then sat back down without being told. Aran said nothing at first, just knelt beside her and handed her a flask of water. When she finally spoke, her voice was rough. That was worse than I thought it would be. But you didn't push me under. He gave her a long look. I promised I wouldn't. She looked toward the ceiling. I think I saw my father again, but I don't think it was really him. Aran shrugged. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was the part of him that still lives in you. They didn't speak again for a while. Outside, the morning wind whispered through the trees. The sun had just begun to warm the trees when Jared stepped through the side entrance to the meditation wing. The doors had been left half open, likely on purpose, a quiet invitation. He passed the training hall, empty now, followed the pulse he'd come to know by heart. Not a force signature, not really. More like the feeling of sunlight through leaves, wounded now. Quiet, but still there. He found her alone in the small side chamber where she'd gone after, a place meant for centering after combat. Marin sat on the floor, her legs tucked beneath her, her back against the cool stone wall. Her eyes were closed, her tunic rumpled, her braid, loosened, hung down her shoulder. Her fingers trembled faintly against the rim of the cup in her lap. He didn't speak, not right away. Instead, he stepped inside and quietly closed the door behind him, settling across from her on the floor. I knew it was fake, she said, after a while. All of it. The sounds, the sights, even the blood on the Werda. But I could smell it. Scorched paint, the ash, Darius's voice. He reached forward and gently took the cup from her hands and set it aside. You don't have to justify how it felt. I do, she said, lifting her head. Her eyes found his, tired but still defiant. Because it'll happen again. I'll face worse than this someday. If I break in the field. You didn't. You bent. That's different. You came back. I needed a run to ground me. Because you're training, he said. And training means trusting someone to pull you back when you fall. Even I needed that once. He looked down again. After a beat, he reached for her hand. May I? She nodded faintly. He laced his fingers through hers, warm and steady. You don't have to carry all of this alone, Marika, he said quietly. You're not a ghost wandering ruins anymore. You're here, alive, and if it ever does happen, if you're caught again, I'll find you. Her throat tightened. You sound certain. I am. He leaned forward slowly, resting her forehead against his shoulder. He held her there, one arm around her waist, the other bracing them both on the stone floor. They stayed like that for a while, unmoving, a quiet rhythm to their breath. A few slow tears spilled down her cheek, but he didn't mention. Eventually, her voice, small and rough. I thought I was past this. You are, he whispered. You're just walking through it. That's not the same as being stuck. A few moments later, he felt her hand tighten slightly in his. Stay? She asked softly. always. The light through the windows had shifted by the time Marin pulled herself upright again. She had washed, dressed, composed herself. The skirt she wore was soft and pale gray, the tunic muted teal with loose sleeves woven in the Katani style. Her hair had been rebraided with a steady hands, her own, this time. No ceremony, just something to hold her together. The balcony of her quarters overlooked the treetops that stretched towards the ridgeline where dusk was already settling. She stood at the rail, arms folded lightly, watching the shadows begin to stretch. It had been harder than she expected. Not the pain. She could take the pain. And not the illusions either, those she had braced for. But what she hadn't expected was to feel that old fear again. The cold, metallic taste of helplessness. The echo of Bastine. The weight of Jarius' death. Cell. The fear that no one would come. She gripped the railing tighter. But someone had. Every time. Ethan. Callista. Stefan. Jared. Even Aran, now. He'd pushed her farther than she'd liked, but he had never let her fall. She closed her eyes. A breeze rose through the trees. She could smell the cedar wood in it, the distant cooking fires near the southern colony, the trace of rain that hadn't yet fallen. Force stirred around her, tired, raw, but quiet. She breathed with it. Still here. Still whole. Still hers. She stepped back from the rail, brushing her hair over her shoulder. The room behind her was softly lit, her travel pack half open on the low bench by the hearth. She had a few hours before she'd need to eat, for the next planning meeting, or more training. Her eyes flicked to the old pendant on the shelf near her bed. Jarius's, still unpolished, still marked by soot and time. I haven't forgotten, she whispered. I may actually stop at the end of chapter 13. I didn't realize how rough this is going to be, and if it's rough for me, it's probably rough for you guys too. So I honestly think that I'm just going to stop at the end of this chapter, which we're almost there. So we can pick up with chapter 14 next time. So I'll just finish out this chapter, and then we're going to call it a night. The hearth room was quiet when Callista entered. She didn't knock. She never had to. Marin was seated on the low cushioned bench beneath the windows, her posture composed but unmistakably weary. A warm mug rested between her hands. She'd changed again into something simpler, softer. The teal tunic from earlier was replaced with an older one, sun-faded and familiar. No weapons, no armor, just Marin. List across the room without a word and lowered herself beside her, not crowding, not pressing. She watched the firelight flicker across her face. You've always been strong, she said. Marin didn't look up. That doesn't mean this doesn't hurt. I know, but strength isn't never breaking. It's learning when to mend. Silence stretched between them. The mug trembled faintly in Marin's hands before she set it aside. I wasn't ready, she admitted. Callista reached over, brushing a strand of hair away from Marin's cheek. You're readier than you think. Footsteps sounded a moment later, quiet, deliberate. Jared, silhouetted in the doorframe, lingered for a heartbeat before stepping into the room. His eyes caught Callista's first, and she gave him the barest nod before rising. She needs someone who knows how to stay, she said, her voice for him alone. He hesitated and then took her place on the bench, his knee brushing Marin's. She didn't look at him at first. Didn't need to. You're not broken, he said. Felt like I was. I know. Marin exhaled slowly. I'm trying to understand why I asked for this, and why Ethan agreed, and why Aran... Because you knew, Jared interrupted gently. Even when you hate it, even when it terrifies you, you knew what this life would ask of you, and you chose not to run. There was a long pause. And you're not doing it alone, he said. His voice lower now. Not ever. Finally, she turned towards him, her eyes searching his. I don't know how I'm going to face the next part, not without falling apart. And fall apart, he said. We'll help build you back up. She leaned her head against his shoulder, her eyes fluttering closed. Melissa stepped through the outer doors onto the stone-floored veranda where Ethan stood watching the darkened trail that led into the lower woods. He didn't turn at her approach. Sorry. She's holding, for now, she said quietly. I know. She shouldn't have to. He asked for it. Melissa was silent. Ethan finally turned, his face cast in shadow. You saw her after, Bestine. You saw what that kind of captivity does. I did, he murmured, and I still remember the first time she woke screaming. Ethan's jaw tightened. His training won't stop that from ever happening again. But maybe it'll give her a better chance. She's not just a weapon. She's never been just a weapon. His voice was sharper than intended, and he ran a hand through his hair, muttering a curse under his breath. She's ours, and I don't want her breaking because we didn't prepare her for the worst. Callista exhaled and then nodded. I trust you, but I'll be there if it gets too far. I'll stop it. Ethan didn't argue, he just nodded, his eyes still fixed on the trees. We all will. Yeah, I'm gonna stop there. Because it's already 9:30. So, hope you guys were able to hang on through all of that. I know it was rough. Been heavy. And the next chapter is also kind of heavy. It's part of the story. It needs to happen. So I'm really glad that you guys are here to kind of bear it with me. Because it's been rough reading that. I don't know if you noticed, but I almost lost my voice a couple of times. So, hope you guys have a good night and are able to get some good rest. I'm going to take a real quick look and see if there's anybody that we can go say hi to, or we get into an ad. So, I will be reading again 2 weeks from now. That would be the 16th? Yes, July 16th is when I will be reading it. I'm going to take a real quick look and see if I can find somebody for us to read to. I'll find anybody that we can say hi to, but maybe? You know what? We're gonna go say hi to MQ, also known as Mega Queen. She is currently playing Leia, which is a super chill game, which I kind of need after all of that. So we're gonna go say hi to Mega Queen. We're gonna have to sit through an ad before we leave, though. So if you guys would be awesome and tag along, I would really appreciate that. Like I said, as much as these chapters were rough, I hope that you were able to enjoy them. I have put a lot of work into reworking A Warrior's Heart, and I hope that that shows. Yeah, there's some chapters that are really difficult, but I think that they're really important for the story. Just 1 second. To see you guys again next Wednesday. I will be streaming again. We're going to be playing SWTOR with PSB. Not sure what we're going to be doing. I will take a look and I'll let you know. Thank you so much, guys, for being here. Have an awesome evening. Stay cool, stay hydrated, and take care of yourselves. I'm gonna go take us over to say hi to Mega Queen, and then I'm gonna go take care of myself. Thanks so much, guys. Have an awesome evening. Bye-bye.